Hi everyone, welcome to the Psych Mom Show. I'm the Psych Mom, Barrie Morganstein. I'm excited to introduce a member of my mom squad, Wendy Solomon from the Speech Vine. She's a speech and language pathologist, and she's going to talk to us today about what she does as a speech language pathologist, but we're really going to focus today on receptive and expressive language and how important that is and how that really affects children in their everyday lives and how it really affects their academics. So can you explain a little bit more about receptive and expressive language and how important it is and how pervasive it is?
Sure. I think I'll start with just kind of a general definition. Receptive language being very quickly just how much a child understands of what is spoken to them, and expressive language being how they use words and how, whatever means they communicate with other people. How it affects their everyday life, which I think kind of shows up first, is the most common thing parents say to me is they just don't seem to understand. I don't think they're listening to what I'm saying. And it's usually not that there's a hearing problem, but that they may have difficulty actually understanding the words that are being spoken, whether it's a concept. Maybe they just have difficulty that after they hear one direction, they really can't retain and process, further directions after that. They may not understand the vocabulary. So in general, these kids may look, in a sports situation or, a social situation, like they just aren't listening, like they're just kind of zoning out when truly they may not be understanding what's going on.
And maybe even quiet and withdrawn too because they're not understanding what's going on around them.
Expressively, you'll see these kids that if they go to a birthday party or they've participated in an activity and they come back and you say, well, tell me about it. And it's this really broad that they just can't find the words to tell you about it. Maybe it's that they can't tell it in order. They may say, well, we made this, we made this thing and it had these little thingies on it, so they're using a lot of, non-specific vocabulary, and those are usually kind of the things that come up in everyday life.
So I say thingy a lot. Should I be concerned?
You may have word retrieval difficulties.
I definitely have word retrieval. I think that has to do with having a child. I think you can all relate. I definitely have word retrieval
And word retrieval difficulties increase, I think, with less sleep and age.
Oh, well,
I have found personally.
Yes,
with me,
then I'm completely at a loss. Yeah. So the idea of the Psych Mom Show is to give parents as much information as possible so they can do a great job parenting. So let us know and let parents know, what are some things that they can do? We were just talking about expressive language and retrieval. What are some things that you think parents can do at home on an everyday basis to help their child improve their expressive language?
With improving expressive language, I think giving them more opportunities to explain some things. For example, if maybe you're going to do a certain activity with maybe a young child, like you're going to the park, you may on the way to the park talk about some of the vocabulary that they'll encounter. So then that vocabulary is familiar to them. So you can talk about, you're kind of prepping them with words. So on the way there, you can talk about, we're going to see a slide, and what do we do on the slide? We slide, and we're going to see friends. What are some games you may play with the friends? So you're giving them that language beforehand, which will help them to process that information as they're participating in it. When you leave the park, you can say, what was your favorite thing you did at the park? So then they have the opportunity, they've heard it, they've kind of real life experienced it, and then that will help them when you ask that question to kind of come up with the words for it. And it also helps to maybe tell them, hey, I'm going to ask you what we did when we leave, so I want you to be thinking about like one thing that was your favorite, and I want you to talk about that instead of giving them an open-ended question, because if a child has problems with language and you give them this big open-ended question, usually they don't know where to start. But if you give them something then to think about beforehand, it's easier for them to come up with
a lot of as much preparation as possible. And I'm also thinking, if you say, well, my favorite part was the slide, what was your part? You're also maybe giving them a prompt too, where they can sort of understand a little bit more about what it is that you're looking for.
Right. And then you also start working on some conversation skills and, giving them, you're modeling a question form. So then that will be easier for them the next time they try to do it.
That's great. What about with academics? What are some things that parents can do to help their kids with their receptive and expressive language when it comes to academics?
With academics, we typically get a lot of language referrals in second or third grade, usually in kindergarten and first grade. that's when you get a lot of the referrals for sounds. They're not making this sound correctly, or they can't rhyme, they just don't get that. But usually starting in 2nd or 3rd grade, we start to get a lot of referrals for they just don't seem to understand what they read, or they don't seem to understand what's going on, with a science lesson in the classroom. They can't retain it. They can't tell about it. And what happens in 2nd or 3rd grade is kids really, the academic kind of curriculum and content, language-wise, there's a huge jump in kind of what they have to process and retain. And it's it's common that you hear 2nd or 3rd grade, they stop learning to read and they read to learn. And what you'll see with a child who's had difficulty with receptive language or understanding is that they may be able to read, but they may not understand what they're reading. They may not be able to write about an event or relate a personal experience, because all those language skills that they may have had trouble with that showed up in everyday life earlier, now they just have to take those skills and put them into written language or read it. So really the same things are start to show up in forms of reading and writing.
Wow, so when we think receptive and expressive language, we have to think not only auditorily receptive language, but visually receptive language.
Right.
And expressive, not just through speaking, but through writing and communicating your thoughts, and even creative writing and all of those things too. It sounds like a lot to understand.
It is, and it heavily impacts.
And it sounds like that you are a wonderful resource to parents who can help them understand all of these things and how speech and language and receptive and expressive language relates to their child's life on an everyday basis. So if there's something that you want to know more about, a speech language pathologist is certainly the go-to person.
And if you're in a school, most of our public schools have a speech language pathologist in place that can be a great advocate for your child if you feel like they're having difficulties with language.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I really appreciate you sharing your
information
with us. Thanks, everybody. See you later.